Friends, it's great for me to be here with all of you today. Unlike some of the other speakers, I was not really familiar with what the centre has been doing. But what I have heard so far is really music to my ears. Because in this time, to hear somebody speaking of a significant role for the public sector is something which is extremely heartening for a person like me. And what I want to share with you today is the kind of efforts we are making through the Planning Commission to make a new beginning in the water sector in India, and I would really visualize an important role for your centre, because that is one of the features of what we are trying to do. We are trying to open up the space that has so far been occupied, in a sense narrowly, by only certain figures, to actually expand into a series of partnerships with organizations such as yours, so that we can get wisdom from all sides wherever it is available that would inform government policy moving forward. There is an urgent need for radical reforms in the water sector, and what I want to share with you today is not just a sense of despair arising out of this ominous data that we have in front of us, but some message of hope, which I am beginning to feel since I took over as Member of Water Resources in the Planning Commission. I can assure you that at the highest political levels of leadership, there is a great commitment today to seeing a new beginning in the water sector. The Honourable Prime Minister, when he called me up requesting me to join the Planning Commission, his central message to me was that I want you to do something. The work that you've done for 20 years at the grassroots, I want that to be mainstreamed into government policy. And I must tell you that right from that day, I've been working on that agenda. And what I want to do today is to share some elements of what we are planning and proposing. The Prime Minister asked me to prepare a strategy paper, not just a water policy. We are also in the process of changing our water policy. But as you know, at times, policy documents are great statements of intent and purpose, but actually their translation into action somehow falls short. And what we want to do is to actually prepare an action plan, where I'm inviting all of you are present here today to be part of that process. To some extent, we have already started that process of greater inclusion in the planning process. You'll be happy to know that for the 12th five-year plan, the working groups that have been set up already fairly in advance for the water sector, all of these working groups, 8 working groups, are headed by professionals from outside government. The chairpersons of each of the working groups are either people in civil society or from academia, and officers such as Mihir Shah have been gracious enough to understand that we need to make a new beginning, so the relevant secretaries are the co-chairs of each of the working groups. And I would really welcome the inputs that all of you provide as part of this working group process, and that would really go into informing the new strategy that we are all trying to get and put together. The command area development, which is the key to getting the water to the farmers, has got completely neglected. And somewhere the focus has to be on reforming the irrigation departments, in changing the human resource profile, in building capacities so that they can manage water resources better. And yes, I agree that there has to be a system by which we are pricing this water. However controversial this may sound, I can tell you, wherever there have been successful participatory irrigation management projects, the farmers themselves have decided in a collective, transparent, open, participatory manner how we are going to charge for the water. I think the important challenge that we need to face is that we have not devolved sufficient autonomy and powers onto the water users associations. We have not integrated them into the framework of the Panchayati Raj institutions. Once we begin to do that, once we give them that authority to both manage and to charge and to then use those revenues at that level itself, I think we can make a tremendous breakthrough in the management of our surface water irrigation projects. We are also going to insist that any investment that has to be made on these projects must be made only after issues of land acquisition, relief and rehabilitation and forest clearance have been sorted out. Otherwise, we have the typical situation where the dam gets constructed and those who have been displaced are struggling 20-25 years in the streets of our large metros, working in terrible conditions and have not been taken care of. This is becoming a large human tragedy in India, a completely needless, completely avoidable human tragedy, if I may add. I think there is, when we can spend such huge amounts on these irrigation projects, a very small proportion, not even 1% is required to do effective relief and rehabilitation. The point is, we are not involved. The people who are being displaced, they should have the first claim on the water that we provide in the commands of these dams. If that kind of provision can be made, I think there will be no problem in successfully carrying out land acquisition and relief and rehabilitation. Of course, we must first assess whether there are other alternatives to these projects which are possible, whether this kind of displacement is necessary. But if it is found that it is unavoidable, then there are recourses we can take to effective R&R, which must become an integral part of these projects. So, these are the kinds of reforms that we need in our groundwater and surface water irrigation sector. I must also mention the watershed management sector. You see, in the 11th 5-year plan, we had the Parsati Committee report. And this raised the hopes of everyone working in the sector that we could make a really new beginning. And a set of common guidelines were issued, and there was great hope that once these are implemented, we would make a great breakthrough in this sector. I'm sorry to say, and Mr. D.K. Sinha is now with us, so I can put him right on the spot with my remarks here, that the Department of Land Resources has not been performing up to the mark. The Planning Commission is very sorry to see that the money, that huge increase in allocation for watershed development that was made in the 11th 5-year plan has actually been utilized for completing those projects which were not really ones which had much merit. And the money was given really to have a much more participatory, a much more livelihood focused, a much more institution building and capacity building focused program. The money has not been utilized for these initiatives. The idea was, and I'm going to be calling a meeting where I'm going to actually, to some extent, crack the whip. I'm going to have the members of the steering committee, which has been set up, which includes eminent people from civil society who have done exemplary work in water development. Those members, people like Mr. Ravi Chopra, Mr. Vijay Shankar, they come back and tell me that there is nothing much that happens in those meetings. Let us review what we are doing, and I am still optimistic that if we follow the spirit of the common guidelines, I think we can really make a new beginning in the way in which watershed development has to happen in our country. I have additional remarks on urban water management, but given the shortage of time, I think I'll restrict myself to just emphasizing the fact that everyone who is concerned with water resource management in this country, I would say we are poised for a new beginning. But let me emphasize, the beginning cannot come with the government playing a lone hand. It has to come in deep partnership with civil society, with academic institutions, with institutions like yours, which I think are completely unique in the landscape that I see, an institution of government officials committed to reforming the public sector. I think is a unique institution. We welcome you all to participate in this process of reforming the water resources sector. From the Planning Commission side, I can assure you, we are trying to make a new beginning, but that beginning will not happen till we have your strength at our beck and call, at shoulder to shoulder, working with us in making a new beginning for you.